Hey guys, Gary here. This is Friday, April the 13th, Friday the 13th. I believe that's the correct day. But anyway, just wanted to come on for a few minutes. I'm about to do a haul video in a few minutes, but I wanted to do one video in particular, just a very short video, a tribute to someone who we lost this past week in the comic book world, who is a very special person. And that is the late, wonderful comic book artist and editor, Carmine Infantino. Now, some of you younger guys may not be terribly familiar with Infantino, but he is really one of the one of the early pioneers in comic books. Really got his start in the golden age of comic books, working for several different companies at a very young age, still a teenager in the early 40s, in the early days of World War II. And worked his way through various companies over the years. Eventually found his way to DC in the 50s, where he was at DC for a very long time. And worked on such, I've got some notes here, and I want to say I'm no authority on Carmine Infantino, but just, I do know a little bit, and I want to make some notes just to mention some of his accomplishments. He was an editor, and then in 1970-71 became publisher at DC. Of course, he was a longtime artist. He's responsible for creating at least two characters. He co-created Batgirl, which some of you may not know. He also co-created one of my favorite comic book characters, Deadman, who seems to be making a resurgence in recent years. He had a long association over the years with the character of Flash. He did artwork on Green Lantern and Justice League America. He worked on very diverse genres of comic books, westerns, sci-fi, mysteries. Whenever Jack Kirby left Marvel in 1970, his famous departure from Marvel, it was Infantino who signed him on with DC, thus beginning the Fourth World, as far as Fourth World work that he did for DC, the Jimmy Olsen books and all the other things that he did. But and unfortunately, I never had the great opportunity and pleasure of meeting Carmine Infantino. And by the way, he passed away this past week or so at the age of 87. He was 87 years old, and I think he'd been retired since the 80s or early 90s, but was still quite a fixture at Comic Cons, comic book conventions, even until I think fairly recently. He's also worked with the screenwriter and novelist Mario Puzo on the first two Superman movies back in the 70s. But anyway, like I said, I never met him in person, but I did have a connection with him once. And just a quick funny story. When I was a small kid in the 60s and reading DC Comics and Marvel Comics, and this is all I ever spent my money on was comic books. I did not buy toys. I did not buy candy. I bought comic books. In another video, I'll share what happened to my collection, but that's another story. But anyway, I remember Carmine's letter column that would be at the end of each issue of DC while he was editor there, and it would be called Dear Carmine. And the letter section, and one time I wrote a letter hoping, that it would be published, and my letter was pertaining to some convoluted, I'm sure, harebrained theory that I had. I had it worked out how Superman was going to overcome his invincibility to kryptonite. And I don't remember what my, I'm sure, tortured theory was. It had something to do with, I recall, the Bizarro Superman. If you remember those, the Bizarro Superman, who are, I believe, immune to kryptonite. and something to do with mirrors and some kind of hocus pocus or something. But anyway, I wrote them. I just thought I know how Superman can be free of kryptonite and retain his powers at all times. And I wrote this very detailed in a letter to them. And while they did not run it in the letter columns, a few weeks later, one day there was a largest envelope from DC, which I was excited to receive, and opened it up. And on the inside, there was a card, and it was kind of the shape of Superman's emblem. The emblem that Superman, sort of a diamond shaped emblem that he wears on his chest with the S insignia on it. And in typewritten on it was a message to me, dear Gary, thank you for your letter. Uh, this wouldn't work. Basically, punching holes in my theory, telling me why my theory wouldn't work. And it was typed, but then at the bottom was thank you very much, sincerely, Carmine Infantino. So, he had taken the time to read a little kid's letter and take it seriously enough to respond to it, even though it didn't run in the comic. He did have that, have that kindness and patience to write me a letter and realizing how important, every kid and every reader was to the comic books, of course. So, um, that's always like a treasured memory. And again, I'd give anything if I still had that card, and I could hold it right here and show it to you. I do not, and that's part of my future video that I'll do about, lost collections. But anyway, Carmine Infantino, a little bit disappointed that there's not more tributes to him. There's not very much in the news. There's not very much on YouTube. But he really was a wonderful figure in comic books for a very long time. So rest in peace. A lovely, lovely man. Made a great contribution to comic books for a very long period. An important part of comic book history in both the Golden Age and the Silver Age and beyond. By all means, someone more learned than me who knows more, in detail about Infantino's history and what his contribution was, by all means, do videos and share it with us. I'm certainly no expert or anything. I just know what I like and what bits and pieces I picked up over the years. But, much love to Infantino's family and all of his legions of fans out there, such as myself. And thanks a lot for watching, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thanks a lot.